Hello, everyone. My name is Ned Dennis, and I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have one of our honorees with us today, Roz Hardiman from Great Britain. Say hello, Roz.
Hello.
It was our great pleasure to induct Roz into the class of 2024. She completed epic swims in the English Channel and also a very cold freshwater Loch Ness. Interestingly, and with great difficulty, Roz contracted polio as a young child, and the use of her legs are extremely limited, to say the least. Um, we had a interview a couple of months ago with the crew for people who had physical disabilities, and Kevin Murphy joined the call, and he was on Roz's Loch Ness swim, and he filled us in some of the difficulties on the actual swim itself. So getting Roz in and out of a boat isn't easy. So in Loch Ness, they had a really high tech, kind of James Bond like landing craft, which is used for transporting sheep. So the front of the boat comes down. So you can
Yeah.
kind of imagine that. And
Okay.
Kevin also described that when Roz stops to feed, unlike somebody like me who was a water polo goalie, she isn't doing an egg beater kick. She's kind of doing a sad side stroke with one arm underneath her, trying to feed while her legs are sinking. And I think for anybody listening, you can kind of imagine that. In bringing Roz to Cancun, Mexico, I give the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame 10 points out of 10 points for concern and interest. And we tried to think mobility. We did a pretty good job until we hit two things. We had a Congress which was only accessible for Roz after we found somebody in the hotel who could open up a staff lift elevator and bring her through the washroom and the garbage dump and get her to the room. It worked, but it wasn't great. And then for the final ceremony, we were upstairs in this open air to two sides, thatched roof, really kind of great place looking over the ocean. And I went to the men's room before the ceremony started. I saw the smallest imaginable stalls in the loo. So we scrambled around a bit to find the nearest facilities would cater a wheelchair, which is kind of across the way. So we didn't quite get it right. And after that, I thought to myself, okay, we got a bit of an education, but we didn't really think about how Roz was going to get to and from Cancun. So the purpose of today is to try to get a better understanding of Roz's challenges actually getting to the swim, to the ceremony. So Roz, let's start with when you pack for a trip. It may seem a bit silly, but what aids are critical, and you know, talk about what challenges you have.
I suppose the main thing is to plan. You have to do your research. You've really got to work out what you're going to need, how you're going to get there. And if you've got lists, you can check it off so you know you're not forgetting anything. And something that applies to anyone, even if they're not disabled. Always remember to take your costume, cap, and goggles in your hand luggage. You don't want it going to a different airport. Believe me, it didn't happen to me personally, but one of my swimming friends, when we were going to European Swimming Championships, lost her luggage and she didn't have a spare in her hand baggage. So it was scrapping around trying to find kit at the last minute. So keep it in your hand luggage. Yeah, but as far as I'm concerned, I have various crucial aids. I mean, I'm fortunate because although I'm a wheelchair user, I can walk a very few steps, provided I've got all the metal work. So obviously, I'm going to be wearing that. Um, crutches, but make sure I've got spare ferrules for them because if they get damaged, then you're going to be in difficulty. Calipers, back brace, so those are essential. And I always take my second best wheelchair after having horrible experiences and No disrespect to your country of residence, Ned, but one of the worst was at Dublin. I'm still waiting for Aer Lingus to reimburse me for the damages. And that was last year. But
Roz,
Berlin, it was a total wreck.
what's a ferrule, Roz? Is that the rubber thing at the bottom of a crutch?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
So
I guess if the metal is there or wood, whatever it is, it's not a very good grip.
no, but if you go over rough terrain, if the bottom rubber gets slightly distorted, say on a stone, it easily tears, and then you're right down to the metal. So that happened to me while going around an archaeological site in Cyprus once and trying to find spare ferrules. It wasn't easy. But anyway, another important thing, particularly for swims, although I suppose if you're going for leisure as well, is to have a chain that you can put round your wheelchair. You don't want it getting nicked while you're actually swimming in whatever it is, you know, whether it's a lake or the sea. So, although you can't really think about it beforehand, you have to hope you're going to find some helpful railings or a lamppost or something that you can chain it to. Uh, and now I also take cable ties and keep a spare pair of scissors in my swimming bag so that I can actually, with my crutches, tie them to my swim bag. So I've had a pair of crutches stolen on Portsmouth Beach. So things like that. Also, spare pairs of gloves, because if you're pushing on a wheelchair, you soon get them shredded. So again, spare pair in your hand luggage. And also, and this is sort of getting on what you might say a tacky subject, but the kind of continence supplies that I need, because as well as mobility, polio knocked out my bladder and my bowel. So I have to use artificial means to empty them. So obviously I've got to take all the supplies for that and sort of think ahead. Uh, and there's of course all the usual things that everyone needs to pack, but also a useful thing to have is what's called a kind of a health passport. You can get them from the various continent suppliers, and it gives details of what you've got in different languages. You fill in the precise details, but mine, it's got 10 languages including non-Western European scripts, so it says that these are essential medical supplies. So the customs officer don't excavate your bag and say, "What's this?" in a language that you can't speak. And also take a copy of your latest prescription in case they think you're running drugs, you know?
So, Roz, on
So,
that, I remember reading a heartbreaking post. I think somebody in Oxford or Cambridge who had their prosthetic leg stolen after they came in for a swim. And the other one that I can relate to, you talk about cable ties. I've had no trouble transporting drugs around the world. You know, my carbo powder looks like a kilo of cocaine. Never a problem. But I have had a lockbox seized, and I have had duct tape and twine seized on the basis I was going to obviously tie up the pilot of the airplane. I could have the electrical
yeah.
cable for the computer, no problem, but not a piece of twine. So now you've packed all of your stuff. I'll assume you know how to get out of your home. That's fine. And now you've got an entourage of 34 Sherpas carrying your gear. How do you physically get into a taxi?
Uh, Fairly easily. I mean, I drive anyway, so I'm used to getting in and out of cars. I have the wheelchair folded down, so the second best wheelchair does fold more or less completely. My good one doesn't. So again, that's a bit of a disadvantage, a no-no for taking. So I hop out, use the crutches, um, have it all folded down. The driver has to lift it into the boot if I'm going by taxi, and I can use my crutches just to sort of pivot onto the seat and get in. So no problem. And I can't show you, I haven't got one to hand, but I've got a very useful gadget that I had to pay for quite a lot of money and to get it fitted. They're called caddies. They're basically like a kind of sort of forklift prong on the front part of the wheelchair that you can put your bag on.
Ah. So now you've arrived at the airport. Um, and obviously there aren't people rushing out to help you. How do you get from the taxi uh, through security? Are there challenges with the metal detectors? Are there challenges with the spacing?
Yeah, there's no problem getting to the check-in desk. I have to say, apart from the scrimmage I experienced at Dublin, yeah, oh goodness, no, very little signage. You don't know where you're going. There's no kind of crowd control. Everyone's milling around. You think, well, where am I supposed to go? And of course, you're below the viewing horizon of most people. So you're going, hello, hello. But anyway, getting through
By the way,
security.
I was about to say we all have that problem in Dublin, but I'm about 6'5", and you're right. I can see over their heads. You got me on that one. Keep going.
Yeah, getting through security is always a nightmare, wherever you are, whether it's in Britain, Europe, and in other parts of the world. Because immediately, yes, you've got to take everything off, and some airports want you to put the wheelchair through separately and to take your calipers off and your back brace. Well, I'm just a kind of heap at that point. You know, how can I get through? I think the worst one for that was Tehran, when you could still go to Iran. Oh my goodness. At least they had very sympathetic female security guards there who were obviously hideously embarrassed at having to do this. But Berlin is also another one that's presented problems on numerous occasions. No, you've got to take your shoes, you've got to take everything off, which means essentially I've sort of lost everything from the waist down. Put that through. And of course, everyone in the queue is going, oh, look at that, look at that. And you just think, how embarrassing, how humiliating. You know,
So
what are you going to be smuggling?
when you finally drag yourself over to the metal detector, and there's a little picture of stand with your arms in the air, and you're kind of, as you described yourself, a bit of a lump at the bottom. How does that work?
I have to say, it is rare now that you have to take everything off and put them through. They always insist on putting the crutches. So if I'm in the wheelchair, you do the normal thing of standing with your arms out and then you get patted down. I have to say, it's never by a really hunky guy, but anyway, that's one of the downsides. And they put the crutches through. And the other thing I have to worry about is they're going to put them through the scanner straight. Because if they go in at an angle, they can get caught and bent.
Okay,
Oh,
Ross.
yeah,
We
yeah,
now get down to the boarding area, and I have to say, this is where you have a slight advantage because you get to board first or at your leisure. So we'll give
yeah.
you that. We'll give you a half a point for that one. Um,
But I have to get off last.
okay, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
get up to the boarding thing. You've got your wheelchair, which presumably doesn't fit down the aisle. What happens
No,
next?
no. The important thing is when you go to check in, you have your bags tagged. You must also have a tag on your wheelchair because that has got to travel with you. There's no point you landing at JFK and finding that your wheelchair's still in Heathrow. That is not helpful. So you've got a proper bag with all the security bars on it. I get out. And it depends. Sometimes they have a transit chair, which is very narrow and does fit between the aisle, but they rarely carry that on the flight. But a lot of the time, it's a matter of me using the crutches and kind of pivoting from arm of each seat along, sort of just doing it, kind of hopping along. I can manage that, but
And
it takes a lot of effort.
presumably you're able to afford the first class. You don't have to travel very far when you're in the airplane.
No, I usually go economy.
Russ,
But one thing, but
go ahead.
being a swimmer, I've
I,
got very strong arms.
I forgot one thing. Having just come through Schiphol and walked about 4 kilometers between gates on a transfer, are you getting the car with the beep beep beep? Are you drafting on that? How does that work?
Uh, Most golf carts at airports don't take wheelchairs, so it's pushing.
Okay, we seriously walked 3 kilometers in Schiphol
Yeah,
on a transfer from Berlin a couple days ago. So you could all of
yeah,
your favorite spots.
yeah. I know what Schiphol is like. I've been there.
Okay, so
several times.
you're in the airplane. You've settled down. You've had your complimentary drink and your Michelin star restaurant meal, and now
How
Mother
many
Nature
compliment me,
calls.
remember?
Mother Nature calls. You don't have the transit wheelchair, and you gave us a teaser on some lower body issues. Uh, Help educate everybody, Roz, but be a little gentle.
Right. So apologies if this is going to embarrass anyone. It's embarrassing me a little. Anyway, it's part of my life. I can't go to the lavatory as most people can. I have to use sort of different ways of doing it. As far as sort of the bladder goes, normally I use intermittent catheterization, which means 5 or 6 times a day I have to put a catheter up inside my bladder to get it to empty. Well, obviously, trying to do that on an aircraft, it's very, very difficult. I suppose I could kind of go down the aisle on my rear end just as I get into the sea, but it's not really nice. And those aircraft carpets aren't very good, particularly after a long haul. Everyone's dropped things on them. No. So I prefer to have an indwelling catheter installed a couple of days before, which means that I then use a bag. And visual aid here, this is where my research came in. The ordinary ones fit on the leg and they're a bit of a nuisance. They're not big capacity, but I found these wonderful ones which fit around your waist. Well, if you have to use them, they are wonderful, believe me. So they've got a litre capacity, so it's a reasonable amount. And for swims in particular, they've only got a little nozzle, which is easily enough opened and shut, and they can go very discreetly under your costume. So they really are absolutely excellent.
Can I stop you for a second, Roz?
Yeah.
We applauded the Irish Long Distance Swimming Association about 2 years ago. They made a costume exception for a swimmer with a colonoscopy bag, and they allowed the swimmer to have a piece of stretch nylon, uh, no no neoprene on it, stretch nylon to actually encase the bag. And we thought that's about the most sensible rule exception we'd ever heard of. Certainly no swimming advantage whatsoever, but you can imagine, with a bag trailing behind you, kicking it every kick for 40,000
Yeah.
kicks.
Yeah, yeah. So it's exactly, the same thing. It's a lot more convenient, but quite often you have to be prepared. You won't get them on the NHS if you're a British swimmer. You usually have to buy them. But okay, it's the sport you choose to do, and you make choices accordingly and budget accordingly too. And so just away you go, and you can very discreetly just sort of twiddle with the thing to empty it. So no problem. I don't even think Kevin was aware on Loch Ness what I was doing half the time.
That was as what we say in America as number one. I give us number two gently.
Yeah, right. Again, that in a sense is a bit simpler because I normally use something called transanal irrigation. It's basically like an enema, and again, visual aid. I can ferret in my bag. It's basically you fill a bag with water, and there's a pumping bit, and this is the bit that goes in. So you fill yourself up with water and eventually it all washes out. It can take up to 45 minutes. So you've got to think ahead, and you don't want to be doing it on the day of a swim. So the day before, because it takes time. It's also, it leaves you feeling quite tired sometimes. And to avoid leakage, I use this. It just sort of fits up inside and makes sure there's nothing else. So, and that can be left in for 24 hours. So that makes life a bit easier and also less prone to problems. But again, try explaining that to airport security.
So when the flight is delayed for 6 hours and forces you to stay in some hotel somewhere, the rest of us groan. But for you, Roz, there's about 14 added complications in that.
Yes, yes. horrible memories of what ended up as being the flight crew's hotel in Belgrade. Our flight had been delayed for 12 hours on that occasion. Ah, yeah.
So the plane has now landed. Everybody jumps up and grabs their carry-on luggage and scoots
Yep.
out as quick as they can, tidying up the passageway as we go. Any bits of newspaper or bits of flight guides that have fallen down. And it's Roz and the flight crew last.
Yep. And insisting that your own wheelchair is delivered to the aircraft door. Some airports seem to think that, oh, it's okay to put it on the carousel. That was what went wrong at Berlin the first time. So no wonder it arrived in pieces. Ah. So you have to argue it and well, have they unloaded it? You know, is the last thing on, it should be the first thing off. I accept I've got to wait till everyone's gone. No problem about that. But it's where they don't know where it is. And on occasion saying, oh, you know, you didn't have one. You used an airport one. No, I didn't. Here is the proof, you know. Ah, oh,
So
it can be.
what's happening is as they're unloading the baggage from the aircraft, I'm guessing your wheelchair and the child prams are supposed to be the last thing they put on and the first thing that somebody hand walks up to the top
Yeah.
of the stairs or something.
Mm.
Is that a fair guess?
Yes. Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah.
I've seen people drop the prams off, but never really gave it much
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that particularly for Schiphol, which is a big airport, you're not catching the average transfer time between flights if you're the
No.
last off. You're a 2.5 hour transfer, not an hour and 10 minute transfer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's advisable to book assistance if you can bear to with the airline, although it's a horrible, protracted business to explain what you want. And then theoretically, somebody will be there to deal with the problems. It doesn't always happen, though. Yeah.
Okay.
But I must say, I was really impressed by Vietnam Airlines. They did it all without making any difficulties about it whatsoever. Have you ever travelled Vietnam Airlines?
No, not yet. Although honoree Catherine Lammers, we met in Berlin a couple weeks ago. Her new posting is going to be Ho Chi Minh City, and she tells me there's a 10K there. So I warned her already. She's going to have a visitor.
Mm. Because the safety video for Vietnam Airlines, you can actually see it on YouTube. It's hysterically funny. It really is. It's well worth watching. But the serious point behind this rambling anecdote is that not even on their video, which is, I say, rather bizarre and comprehensive, never on any flight has anyone said, what would you be your particular needs when it comes to an emergency evacuation? I get the feeling that I'd be the one left on the burning plane. But,
The good news is that everybody would step over you, Ross.
well, yes.
I
Yeah.
hadn't. There's a lot of things I hadn't considered. I'm adding that to the list. You now get off the airplane. You're in your wheelchair. Everything is working so far. I'm kind of running up the stairs or taking the escalator. My guess is you're waiting for these lifts, which I occasionally see at the airport. I never pay much attention. Do
Yeah.
they work? Are they there?
It depends. Uh, Sometimes they're there, but they're not working. And on one occasion, it was at I think it was Gatwick. We had to go a very circuitous route with the kind of assistance vehicle, ending up driving across the runway rather frighteningly at one point. But and more recently at Luang Prabang, the lifts worked when we arrived there, but 3 days later, when we were leaving, the lifts weren't working. So that posed problems.
Okay.
So you don't know. And sometimes the lifts are tucked away in an inconvenient part of the airport. Not so much at the big airports, they're very well signposted, but smaller ones, you've really got issues about trying to find where they are. And if you come out of the lift, you might not be in the right place for your gate. Newcastle's bad for that. You can't do Newcastle without assistance because you have to go through a security gate to get to the lift. So
Okay.
you soon learn about all these things.
You now roll off the plane at Heathrow, and you want to get on the Heathrow Express. I imagine the ramps are in place, and it's a fairly easy access on to the train. Tell me about
I've
airport buses.
I've never actually used the Heathrow Express, and again,
Okay.
there are issues with trains. The airport buses, by and large, are accessible. They have a kind of flat down ramp, and some of them kind of kneel a bit, so they lower. So I've never had any problems with that, or indeed the hotel hopper they have at Heathrow. So that tends to be the easiest bit, and something certainly in mainland Britain, National Express coaches are accessible. You have to book it beforehand, but they do have a wheelchair lift.
Okay. Final one, Roz, unless you've got more to add, don't hesitate, is you've arrived at the hotel, and I think we've all had this experience that our sea view room turns out to be looking at the other ocean, 5,000 kilometers away. The hotel spa was there a few years ago, but it's closed. And the plenty of nice chairs by the beach are $10 a piece. Have you had problems booking hotels that swear they're accessible and you get there and they're far from it?
Yes, yeah, it happens regularly. I And however much they don't really understand what you mean by access, even though you clearly state wheelchair user. And now I've taken to quoting the width of my wheelchair. And we're not talking foreign destinations here. This was at a BLDSA event. Grimsby. I mean, we're not talking exotic here. Well, the hotel was built in the 60s and the doorways were very narrow. I couldn't get my wheelchair in unless it was folded. So thank goodness, at least I was able to stand up, fold it, and stagger in with it. But, just sort of simple things like that, let alone sort of the problems about bathroom provision. In Cancun, although the hotel was accessible, it was ramped all the way up to the entrance. There was a lift. Well, in fact, there were several lifts. No problem. Get in the room, but it wasn't an accessible room. They don't have them apparently. Very few in Mexico, and the bathroom, the shower wasn't what you'd call an accessible one. So I had to improvise and sort of pile up stuff at the bottom of the shower and sit on the floor of it. But it was I did shower, but it wasn't easy.
So Roz, I want to thank you very much. You and I talked ahead of time, and I made sure you were somewhat comfortable talking about the lower body issues. So thank you for giving everyone an education. One of the reasons we wanted to do this call is that there are swimmers, and I'd be one. I don't kick very much, so I'd be saying, well, I don't really use my legs much swimming. So you kind of get a little bit deceived, and you think, well, okay, Roz doesn't use her legs very much, so. And then over time, I go, okay, but got this difficulty and this difficulty and this difficulty and this difficulty. And when I add the whole thing up, I just think it's amazing you're able to get to the swims, you're able to get in the water, do the feeds, get home, and thank you for giving everybody an education.
Well, I agreed to it because I thought I've had to do a lot of research to work out ways and means, and it might be of use to other people. I mean, some things are very obvious, like putting tags on your wheelchair, but other things, researching the different products because many GPs are not really aware of what is available because it is a bit specialist. So it's taken me a while to get to a situation where, I know what works. And, if it can help somebody else, I'm very pleased to be of use.
Okay. Thank you very much. And for the listeners and the viewers, we have more than 100 videos now on our YouTube channel. We also post daily on Facebook. In a second, the list of contacts will appear. Feel free to subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you on the next call.